does
Hey,
that?
do you guys want to talk about the Energon universe?
No,
Oh boy, this again with
no,
the hyperfixation
no.
on the Energon universe and the
Oh my
constantly talking about it. Who does this guy think
goodness.
he is?
Honestly,
We
it's
keep
not that
going.
bad, but you sure are bringing it up again, huh?
Don't you have anything else to talk about, like Combo Man? Or why can't you make nice videos about stupid things like your brother?
Can't you bring something else to class?
Oh. Well, after the last video, I needed something relatively normal to talk about. So, what better topic than a return to our favorite shiny and new shared universe, the Energon universe. This time we're returning to the G.I. Joe corner by taking a look at the next batch of miniseries setting up the eventual ongoing Joe comic, Scarlet and Destro. Having gotten somewhat more into G.I. Joe as a whole after reading the first two, I'm in a slightly better spot to talk about these two, as I now have at least some frame of reference as to how these two are normally portrayed. You guys know the drill at this point. I'm discussing the main plot points, but not every single detail and subplot. Spoiler warning is advised. We've got two separate comics to cover today, so let's roll out! Wrong franchise. First up, we've got Scarlet from writer Kelly Thompson. Man, I can't think of many writers who really blew up in popularity like she did. She's got quite the pedigree, including Birds of Prey and winning an Eisner Award for her work on Black Widow, along with some other great work on Rogue and Gambit, Hawkeye, and so much more. So yeah, she's a perfect fit to introduce G.I. Joe's de facto female lead to this new universe. On art duties, we've got Marco Ferrari, who's mainly worked on some other Image titles such as Phantom Red and Frontiersman. The best way I can describe his style is that it feels right at home with the other Joe comics in this universe, while having a distinctly anime-inspired flair to it, which I mean in the best possible way. Now onto the plot of this little ditty. The plot of this comic is relatively simple, but that's not inherently a bad thing. We start with Scarlet on what starts out as a fairly routine information gathering op regarding a human trafficking opera. Oh my god, that escalated quickly. Wow. She sees her old friend Jinx there after having been missing for 2 years, and that's when all hell breaks loose. Despite being told several times not to engage, she engages so Jinx can escape, and promptly gets discharged from her unit for insubordination. May seem a bit harsh, but based on the conversation, it seems this is a regular occurrence for Scarlet, and her glitch head boss Gorman had enough of it. At that point, she comes home to find Stalker in her room, returning from Duke, and gives her a mission to infiltrate the Arishikage ninja clan to both get Jinx out of there and to deal with a secret super weapon the clan is rumored to possess. So her plan is to prove her worth and join the Arashikage, which goes really well up until she gets knocked out by their highest ranking member, Storm Shadow, and strapped to a chair. She confiscated a lockpick she apparently hid in her lips somehow, so instead she escapes with a razor blade she hid inside her abdomen. Jesus Christ! You guys know blood and gore doesn't bother me. That much should be evident from the Blackest Night video, but holy
Scrap.
this comic loves going from 0 to 100 and back again. She escapes and evidently this is all a test, managing to impress the hard master of the clan. So much so that she gets assigned on a mission she knows full well that they expect her not to return from, as a rite of passage to prove that she's loyal and willing to sacrifice whatever she needs to for the clan. Her mission? Oh, nothing too major. Just stealing a super weapon from the Yakuza, who are planning to hand it over to their mysterious buyer. So no pressure. She makes her way through the facility, having to fight and sneak her way through guards and sharks, which you'd think would be quite the ordeal, but
Actually, it was super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
with the help of Storm Shadow as an EMP device, just in time for the Yakuza's mysterious buyer to arrive, who turns out to be... yeah, those guys. Luckily, despite the resulting chaos with the Yakuza and Cobra alike, Red, Discount Electra, and Stormy Daniels managed to secure this mysterious weapon, which turns out to be a fancy sword with a name I'm not even gonna try and pronounce, but it translates to Sword of Life, which makes it quite ironic when the first thing Storm Shadow does with it is slice some poor sap in half. The sword also has a distinct pink glow to it, which if you've been keeping up with this universe, you know exactly what that means. Cobra Commander even says as much. All of them make their escape, and the series officially ends with Scarlet rendezvousing with her old friend Snowjob, giving him a bag full of intel courtesy of Jinx. The former is convinced by the latter to stay in the Arashikage for longer since it's better to be allies with them than risk having to fight them and Cobra, with Scarlet having some regrets over helping them as Storm Shadow shows off his new toy in front of the entire clan. Overall, I ended up really liking this. I think Kelly Thompson was the perfect choice for this book, and Marco Ferrari was a great match for the vibe and tone the comic is going for. The anime feel I mentioned earlier really shines in the fight scenes. I'd go so far as to say this comic has the best action scenes in the entire Energon universe so far. His artwork conveys speed in a way the other comics don't. Not to say they're bad by any means, but with this I can practically hear the wind rushing with each sword swipe. The character work was also top notch. Scarlett herself is sassy and quick with a quip, and it's no wonder she's sent on infiltration jobs so often. She's just so likable that I can see her getting along with just about anyone. Speaking of, I got immediately invested in her relationship with Jinx. These two are so close that you want to see Scarlett get her out of the predicament she's gotten herself into. That said, I'm not sure if I agree with Thompson here. If these two are just good friends, then sailors Uranus and Neptune are just cousins. But yeah, really recommend checking out Scarlet. It's a lot of fun from the beginning to end. Next up is Destro, second biggest villain in the franchise and who already had a pretty solid introduction in both Duke and Cobra Commander, so I'm interested to see how his story continues here. In this one, we've got writer Dan Waters, and he's got quite the diverse catalog. He's done stuff for DC like Detective Comics and Lucifer, plenty of video game tie-ins for the likes of Assassin's Creed, Dark Souls, and Little Nightmares of various publishers. Even has some creator-owned stuff under his belt like Homesick Pilots and Coffin Bound. He's done a lot. I haven't heard of his creator-owned stuff before writing this, but it all looks super cool. I'm gonna have to give the rest of his bibliography a read after this. Destro is drawn by Andre Bresson. I wasn't able to find a lot on his work, but he seems to mainly work with Image, namely stories like Birthright and Devil's Right. Holy
Frag.
that one looks awesome. Oh god, my backlog is so bad at this point. But anyway, his style is like the complete opposite of Ferrari's. Instead of something flashy and over the top, the artwork you'll find in Destro is much more understated and, dare I say, gritty, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if Bresson based these characters off real people. Not to say it's not exciting, far from it. Just that, for the most part, it's like comparing action scenes from, say, a Batman movie compared to an action scene from Thor Ragnarok. It all feels more real, but not in a way that feels like all of the fun is drained from it. G.I. Joe stories should have fun with themselves, otherwise you've just got a run-of-the-mill military story. So that is to say, it fits a serious sociopathic warlord like Destro perfectly. This story is quite unique compared to Skybound's other offerings because while it can feel similar to Cobra Commander in the sense of only being villains fighting other villains, it isn't a personal conflict. Destro and the antagonists, twins by the name of Tomax and Xamot, all look at it from a calculated business perspective, so their companies can come out on top. In fact, there really isn't anything Destro takes personally. He's rather detached to just about everything other than his family's legacy. The Destro clan has built their fortune supplying weapons to major conflicts since at least the 1600s, and he continues this tradition with such pride that he'd rather blow himself and any opposition with one of his collectible nuclear warheads he just so happens to possess than risk a hostile takeover of the family business. Needless to say, he's furious when his cousin Artyom tries selling Mars to the twins and overall not taking the family business as seriously as he does, even after Destro and his forces single-handedly oust a corrupt dictator so he can rule the country of Darklonia for himself. Destro ends up being a surprisingly nuanced protagonist as a result. Due to his single-minded fixation on the family business, he ends up feeling very empty and even lonely. His only real companions, if you can even call them that, are his ancestors in the family crypt. Whenever he needs guidance, he makes a trek through the mountains and can seemingly hear their spirits. Tomax and Xamot, however, I don't want to call them one-dimensional since we haven't seen them all that much in comparison. They do feel more cold and calculated compared to the likes of Destro's more hot-headed approach to taking out their enemies, but we'll definitely have much more to say about them by the time I get around to reviewing the new G.I. Joe ongoing. The one villain I did love more than expected is Chameleon. She's rather interesting because while there is a character named Chameleon in prior Joe adventures, this one is so far removed that she may as well be a new character entirely, but the name certainly fits. She's an assassin with mechanical implants that allow her to disable most weapons via EMP, along with a few other tricks like an artificial intelligence satellite named Overkill, designed for identifying and getting rid of targets on a worldwide scale. Oh, for God's sake, it's bad enough AI is being used to churn out glitchy art, but now it's moving in on the military-industrial complex. While they're at it, are they going to use AI to make healthcare decisions too? God, using machines to do man's work. The most amusing thing about her is her identity, an heiress by the name of Astoria Carlton Ritz. If you're wondering why that's relevant, I don't blame you, since I doubt the vast majority of people watching this would even have been old enough to catch the reference. Astoria was a one-off character from the Generation 1 Transformers cartoon in the episode The Girl Who Loved Powerglide. I'm sure you can hazard a guess on what that episode was about just based off the title. Her powers even seem to be playing off various oddities from that episode. Her EMP reflecting how in the G1 cartoon any device she touched immediately went haywire for no discernible reason, or having superhuman strength and durability out of nowhere. Look at this. Powerglide backhands her so hard she bounces off the concrete. What the
Frag.
is she made of? Overall, I'd say all the characters are written pretty well, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of them in the near future. My only real nitpick is with Cobra Commander suddenly having a snake lisp out of nowhere. In the 80s cartoon Skybound is mainly using as inspiration. He only had it for the first miniseries before it was dropped for the rest of the show, and he didn't have it at all in his own miniseries that this is technically a sequel to. So I'm not sure why he's got it now. As a whole, I'd say this is a really good read. What keeps things interesting is that despite all the heavy losses, Destro never feels outmatched or like he's the underdog in his own story. Ironically, the twins sum it up perfectly. He uses every setback as a new opportunity, and even when he loses, he ends up turning it around in his favor, and it all feels perfectly believable. Generally speaking, I'd say the Energon universe is at a really strong first year. Some titles weren't as good as others, but I wouldn't call any outright bad. If I had to rank them, it'd look something like this. Next time we tune into the universe, we'll be revisiting Transformers and seeing if that's still top tier, then taking a look at what G.I. Joe's cooked up now that the two teams have been assembled. Before I call it for today, I'd like to share some news tangentially related to the channel. Tim's Corner Comics, where I've been picking up all these Skybound issues, will have shut its doors by the time this video goes live. I mentioned them on the channel a few times before, and the staff and owner have always been super nice to me, so I just wanted to give them one last shout out. They had a strong 42-year run, and I'm sad to see the place go, but I wish nothing for the best for everyone there. But that's all for now. This is Major Disaster signing off. Thank you for watching, and make sure to look away from your screen for at least 20 seconds to prevent your useless cousin from selling your company to a couple of creepy twins.